and welcome to the Lord of Dragons. I'm your host, Jack, and today we are talking about Season 3 of House of the Dragon. And so, if you've watched my past videos, we've already covered what's going to happen in Season 2 of House of the Dragon, beginning where they left off in Season 1 and ending where I believe Season 2 will end. And before I get to that, a big spoiler alert for what we're going to talk about. If you don't want to know who's going to die, who's going to pop in this season, definitely click off this video. Nonetheless, Season 3 picks up with Princess Rhaenyra / Queen Rhaenyra and Prince Daemon taking King's Landing as Sir Criston Cole and Prince Aemon leave to go to Harrenhal to find Prince Daemon. And so we're picking up right there, right where they are going to leave off, I believe, this season. We're going to find out pretty soon, but if you think Season 2 has a lot of action ahead, wait until you see what's coming up in Season 3. I'm going to take most of this source material right from the book Fire and Blood. It's written out pretty well. There's more material than I thought there. They could probably squeeze 5 seasons out of this show at least if they want to. It all depends on where they're going to go with the end and how they're going to shift it around. The storyline's really based around Rhaenyra Targaryen, but there is a lot that happens after her passing, let's say. So, well, again, spoiler alert, you already know that if you're here, so, because we're jumping ahead to Season 3. Season 2, I believe, is going to end about where Daemon and Rhaenyra take the Iron Throne, and so I picked right up for Season 3 and Fire and Blood, and here we are. Let's do it. Let's take a look at Season 3 of House of the Dragon. I'm Jack, and you're watching The Lord of Dragons. Even as King's Landing fell to Rhaenyra Targaryen and her dragons, Prince Aemon and Sir Criston Cole were advancing on Harrenhal, whilst the Lannister host under Adrian Tarbeck swept eastward. The Westermen were slowed briefly when Lord Joseph Smallwood of Acorn Hall rode forth to join Lord Piper and the remnants of his defeated host. But Piper died in the battle that ensued, felled when his heart burst at the sight of his favorite grandson's head upon a spear, or so claimed Mushroom. See, it's a great start to Season 3 already. Lord Smallwood fell back to his castle. A second battle followed 3 days later when the Rivermen regrouped under a hedge knight named Sir Harry Penny. This unlikely hero died soon after while slaying Adrian Tarbeck. Once more, the Lannisters prevailed, cutting down the Rivermen as they fled. The Western host resumed its march to Harrenhal under the aged Lord Humphrey Lefford, who had suffered so many wounds that he commanded from a litter. Little did Lord Lefford know that a fresh foe was descending on them from the north. At the head of 2,000 savage Northmen and flying Queen Rhaenyra's quartered banners was Lord of Barrowton, Roderick Dustin, a warrior so old and hoary, men called him Roddy the Ruin. His host was made up of grizzled graybeards, an old male, and ragged skins, every man a seasoned warrior, and every man a horse. They called themselves the Winter Wolves. "We have come to die for the Dragon Queen," Lord Roderick announced at the twins when Lady Sabitha Frey rode out to greet them. Meanwhile, muddy roads and rainstorms slowed the pace of Aemon's advance, for his host was made up largely of people on foot, with a long baggage train. Sir Criston's vanguard fought and won a sharp battle against Sir Oswald Woade and the Lords Derry and Root on the lake shore, but met no other opposition. After 19 days on the march, they reached Harrenhal and found the gates open, with Prince Daemon and all his people gone. Aemon mistakenly declares it a victory, saying that the river scum scum had fled rather than faced his wrath. Then he heard about the fall of King's Landing, and felt thrice the fool. His fury was fearsome to behold. First to suffer for it was Sir Simon Strong, castellan of Harrenhal, and a family for whom Prince Aemon had no love. Even though he was his own great-nephew, Larys Strong the Clubfoot was lord of Harrenhal and sat on King Aegon's council as master of whispers, he had yielded up the castle to Prince Daemon with haste, and it convinced Aemon that the old man was a traitor, and his denials only inflamed the prince, and he decided that Larys Clubfoot was a traitor as well. How else would Daemon and Rhaenyra have known when King's Landing was the most vulnerable? Someone on the council had sent word to them, and Larys Clubfoot was Breakbone's brother, and thus an uncle to Rhaenyra's bastards. Aemon commanded that Sir Simon be given a sword. Let the gods decide if you speak truly, he said. If you are innocent, the warrior will give you the strength to defeat me. The one-sided duel ensued, and Aemon cut the old man to pieces and fed his corpse to Vhagar. Sir Simon's grandsons did not outlive him for long. One by one, every man and boy with strong blood in his veins was dragged forth and put to death, until the heap made of their heads stood 3 feet tall. How strong an ancient line of noble warriors, boasting descent from the first men, came to an ignoble end in the ward of Harrenhal. No true-born Strong was spared, nor any bastard save, oddly, for Alys Rivers. Though the wet nurse was twice his age, thrice by mushrooms count, Prince Aemon had taken her into his bed as a prize of war soon after taking Harrenhal, and seemingly preferring her to all the other women of the castle, including many pretty maids of his own age. West of Harrenhal, fighting continued in the Riverlands as the Lannister hosts slogged onward. Lord Lefford had slowed their march to a crawl, but as they reached the western shores of the God's Eye, they found a huge new army athwart their path. Roddy the Ruin and his winter wolves had joined with Forrest Frey, Lord of the Crossing, and Red Rob Rivers, known as the Bowmen of Raventree. The Northmen numbered 2,000. Frey commanded 200 knights and thrice as many on foot, and Rivers brought 300 archers. Just as Lord Lefford halted to confront the enemy in front of him, another one appeared to the south, where Longleaf Lionslayer and a ragged band of survivors from earlier battles had been joined by the Lords Bigglestone, Chambers, and Perrin. Caught between these two foes, Lefford hesitated to move against either, for fear of the other falling on his rear. Instead, he put his back to the lake, dug in, and sent ravens to Prince Aemon at Harrenhal, begging his aid, though none would ever reach him, because Red Rob Rivers, said to be the finest archer in all of Westeros, shot them all down. More rivermen turned up the next day, led by Sir Jerbold Grey, Lord John Charlton, and the new Lord of Raventree, 11-year-old Benjicot Blackwood. With their numbers having grown, the Queen's men decided that the time had come to attack. Best make an end to these lions before the dragons come, said Roddy the Ruin. The next day, the bloodiest land battle of the Dance of the Dragons began with the rising of the sun. The Citadel called it the Battle by the Lakeshore, but those who lived to tell of it called it the Fish Feed. Attacked from 3 sides, the Westermen were driven back foot by foot into the waters of the God's Eye. Hundreds died there, cut down whilst fighting in the reeds. Hundreds more drowned as they tried to flee. By nightfall, 2,000 men were dead, amongst them many notables, including Lord Frey, Lord Lefford, Lord Bigglestone, Lord Charlton, Lord Swift, Lord Rain, Sir Clarent Crakehall, and Sir Emery Hill, the bastard of Lannisport. The Lannister host was shattered and slaughtered, but at such cost that young Ben Blackwood, the boy lord of Raventree, wept when he saw the heaps of the dead. The most grievous losses were suffered by the Northmen, for the Winter Wolves had begged the honor of leading the attack, and had not once, but 5 times charged into the ranks of Lannister spears. More than 2/3 of the men who had ridden south with Lord Dustin were dead or wounded. Elsewhere in the realm, smaller battles continued. Lord Ormond Hightower and Prince Daeron the Daring continued to win victories, enforcing the submission of the Rowans of Golden Grove, the Oakhearts of Old Oak and the lords of the Shield Islands, for none dared face Tessarion the Blue Queen. Lord Boros Baratheon called his banners and assembled nearly 6,000 men at Storm's End, with the avowed intent of marching on King's Landing, only to lead them south into the mountains instead. He used the pretext of Dornish incursions into the Stormlands to justify his actions, but many and more were heard to whisper that it was the dragons ahead and not the Dornishmen behind that prompted his change of heart. Out in the Sunset Sea, the long ships of the Red Kraken had fallen upon Fair Isle, sweeping from one end of the island to the other, whilst Lord Farman sheltered behind his walls, sending out pleas for help that never came. At Harrenhal, Aemond and Sir Criston debated how best to answer the Queen's attacks. The River Lords knew better than to attempt a siege on Harrenhal, nor did they want to face Vhagar. The King's men were running short of food and fodder, and losing men and horses to hunger and sickness. Only blackened fields and burned villages remained within sight of the castle's massive walls, and those foraging parties that ventured out farther did not return. Sir Criston urged for a withdrawal south, where Aegon's support was the strongest, but the prince refused, saying, "Only a craven runs from traitors." The loss of both King's Landing and the Iron Throne had enraged him, and when word of the fish feed reached him, he almost strangled the squire that brought him the news. Only Alys Rivers was able to intercede, saving the boy's life. Prince Aemon favored an immediate attack on King's Landing, insisting none of the Queen's dragons were a match for Vhagar. Sir Criston called that folly. "1 against 6 is a fight for fools, my prince," he declared. He urged him to join his strength to Lord Hightowers, where he could reunite with his brother Daeron and his dragon. He also knew that Aegon had escaped Rhaenyra's grasp. He could reclaim Sunfire and join his brothers, and if they could somehow get someone inside the city to free Helena, then she could bring Dreamfire to the battle. 4 dragons could perhaps prevail against 6 if one was Vhagar. Prince Aemon refused to consider this craven course. He could have commanded Sir Criston's obedience, but he did not. Grand Maester Munkin says that this was because of his respect for the older man. Mushroom, of course, suggested that the two had become rivals for the affection of the wet nurse Alys Rivers, who had used love potions and philters to inflame their passions. Septon Eustace echoes the dwarf in part, but says that it was only Aemond who had become besotted with the Rivers woman, to such an extent that he could not bear the thought of leaving her. Whatever the reason, Aemond and Cole part ways. Cole takes the host and leads him south to join up with Ormond Hightower and Prince Daeron. Aemond meant to fight his own war, raining fire on the traitors from the air. Soon or late, Rhaenyra would send a dragon or two to stop him, and Vhagar would destroy them. Though she dare not send all her dragons, Aemond insisted, that would leave King's Landing naked and vulnerable, nor will she risk Syrax or that last sweet son of hers. She may call herself a queen, but she has a woman's parts, a woman's faint heart, and a mother's fears. The Kingmaker and the Kinslayer parted ways, each to his own fate. In King's Landing, Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen set about rewarding her friends and inflicting savage punishments on those who had served her half-brother. Commander of the Gold Cloaks, Sir Luther Largent, is ennobled. Sir Laurent Marbrand is installed as Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard and charged with finding 6 worthy knights to serve beside him. Grand Maester Orwyle was sent to the dungeons, and Her Grace wrote to Citadel to inform them that her leal servant, Gerardus, was henceforth the only true Grand Maester. The surviving Black Lords and Knights that had been sent to the dungeons under Aegon were freed and rewarded with lands, offices, and honors. Huge rewards were posted for information leading to the capture of the usurper, styling himself King Aegon II, his daughter Jaehaera, his son Maelor, the false knights Willis Fell and Rickard Thorne, and Larys Strong the Clubfoot. When that failed to produce the desired result, Her Grace sent forth hunting parties of Knights Inquisitor to seek after the traitors and villains who had escaped her and to punish any man found to have assisted them. Queen Queen Alicent was fettered at wrist and ankle with golden chains, though her stepdaughter spared her life for the sake of our father who loved you once. Her own father was less than fortunate. Sir Otto Hightower, who had served 3 kings as hand, was the first traitor to be beheaded. Ironrod Jasper Wilde was next to the block, still insisting that by law a king's son must come before his daughter. Sir Tywin Lannister was given over to the torturers instead, in hopes of recovering some of the crown's treasure. Lords Rosby and Stokeworth, blacks who had gone green to avoid the dungeons, attempted to turn black again, but the Queen declared that faithless friends were worse than foes, and ordered their lying tongues be removed before their executions. Both lords only had daughters, which left her with an awkward succession problem. Prince Daemon proposed marrying Lord Rosby's daughter, a maid of 12, to Hard Hugh Hammer, and Lord Stokeworth's daughter, a girl of 6, to Ulf the Sot, now going by Ulf White, keeping the lands black while suitably rewarding the Seeds for their valor in battle. But the Queen's hand, Lord Corlys Velaryon, argued against this, for both girls had younger brothers. He insisted Rhaenyra's own claim to the Iron Throne was a special case, since her father had named her as his heir. Lords Rosby and Stokeworth had done no such thing. Disinheriting their sons in favor of their daughters would overturn centuries of law and precedent, and call into question the rights of scores of other lords throughout Westeros, whose own claims might be seen as inferior to those of elder sisters. The Queen did not want to lose her supporters, so she went with Lord Corlys's idea over Prince Daemon's. The lands, castles, and coin of House Rosby and House Stokeworth went to the sons of the 2 executed lords, while Hugh Hammer and Ulf White were both knighted and granted small holdings on Driftmark. The 2 got very drunk to celebrate. Hugh Hammer beat to death one of the Queen's household knights in a brothel on the Street of Silk when the 2 quarreled over the maidenhood of a young virgin. Ulf White rode drunkenly through the alleys of Flea Bottom, wearing nothing but his golden spurs. The tales of Mushroom cannot be ascertained, but beyond a doubt, the people of King's Landing grew to despise the both of them. Even less loved was the man her Grace chose as her Lord Treasurer and Master of Coin, her longtime supporter, Bartimos Celtigar, Lord of Claw Isle. Lord Celtigar was well suited for the office, staunch and unwavering in his support of the Queen, unrelenting, incorruptible, ingenious, all agreed, and very wealthy in the bargain. Rhaenyra had dire need of such a man, for she found herself in desperate need of coin. Though the crown had been flush with gold upon the passing of King Viserys, King Aegon had seized the treasury along with the crown, and his master of coin, Tywin Lannister, had shipped off 3/4 of the late king's wealth for safekeeping. The portion he kept in King's Landing had already been spent, leaving only empty vaults for his half-sister when she took the city. The rest of Viserys' treasure had been entrusted to the Hightowers of Oldtown, the Lannisters of Casterly Rock, and the Iron Bank of Braavos, and was beyond the Queen's grasp. Lord Celtigar set out at once to redress the problem. To do so, he restored the same taxes that his ancestor, Lord Edwell, had once enacted during the regency of King Jaehaerys, and piled on many a new levy besides. Taxes on wine and ale were doubled, port fees tripled, every shopkeeper within the city walls was assessed a fee for the right to keep his doors open. Innkeeps were required to pay 1 silver stag for each bed in their inns. The entry and exit fees that the Lord of Ayr had once assessed were brought back and tripled. A tax on property was decreed. Rich merchants in their manses or beggars in hovels all must pay, depending on how much land they took up. Not even the whores are safe, the small folk told each other. The cunt tax will be next, and then the tail tax. The rats must pay their share. The taxes fell heaviest on merchants and traders. When the Velaryon fleet had closed the gullet, a great many ships found themselves trapped at King's Landing. The Queen's new master of coin now assessed heavy fees on all such before he would allow them to sail. Some captains protested that they had already paid the required duties, taxes, taxes and tariffs, and even produced papers as proof. But Lord Celtigar dismissed their claims. Paying coin to the usurper is proof of naught but treason, he said. It does not decrease the duties owed to our gracious queen. Those who refused to pay, or lacked the means, had their ships and cargoes seized and sold. Even executions became a source of coin. Lord Celtigar decreed traitors, rebels, and murderers would all be beheaded within the dragon pit, and their corpses fed to the queen's dragons. All were welcome to bear witness to the fate that awaited evil men, but each must pay 3 pennies at the gates to be admitted. She replenished her coffers, but at a grievous cost. Neither Aegon nor his brother Aemon had ever been well loved by the people of the city, and many had welcomed to the queen's return. But love and hate are 2 faces of the same coin. As fresh heads began appearing daily upon the spikes above the city gates, accompanied by ever more exacting taxes, the coin turned. The girl they once cheered as the realm's delight was now seen as a grasping and vindictive woman, the queen as cruel as any king before her. One wit named her King Maegor with teats, and for 100 years thereafter, Maegor's teats was a common curse amongst Kingslanders. With the city, castle, and throne in her possession, defended by no fewer than 6 dragons, Rhaenyra felt secure enough to send for her sons. A dozen ships set sail from Dragonstone, carrying the queen's ladies, her beloved fool Mushroom, and her son Aegon the Younger. Rhaenyra made the boy her cupbearer, so he might never be far from her side. Another fleet set out from Gulltown, with Prince Joffrey, the last of the queen's 3 sons by Laenor Velaryon, together with his dragon Tyraxus. Prince Daemon's daughter Rhaena remained in the Vale as a ward of Lady Arryn, whilst her twin, the dragon rider Baela, divided her days between Driftmark and Dragonstone. Her Grace began to make plans for a lavish celebration to mark Joffrey's formal installation as Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Even the White Worm came to court. The Lysene harlot Mysaria emerged from the shadows to take up residence in the Red Keep. Though she was never officially seated with the small council, the woman, now known as Lady Misery, became the mistress of whisperers in all but name, with eyes and ears in every brothel, alehouse, and pot shop in King's Landing, and in the halls and bedchambers of the mighty as well. Though the years had thickened the body that had been so lithe and lissom, Prince Daemon remained in her thrall, and called upon her every evening, with Queen Rhaenyra's apparent blessing. "Let Daemon slake his hungers where he will," she is reported to have said, "and we shall do the same." Septon Eustace suggests somewhat wappishly that her Grace's own hungers were slaked largely with sweetmeats, cakes, and lamprey pie, as Rhaenyra grew ever more stout during her days in King's Landing. In the fullness of her victory, Rhaenyra Targaryen did not suspect how few days remained to her. Yet every time she sat the Iron Throne, its cruel blades drew fresh blood from her hands, arms, and legs, a sign that all could read clearly. Septon Eustace claims the Queen's downfall began at an inn called the Hogshead in the town of Bitterbridge, on the north bank of the Mander, near the foot of the old stone bridge that gave the town its name. With Ormond Hightower besieging Longtable, some 30 leagues to the southwest, Bitterbridge was crowded with men and women fleeing before his advancing host. The widowed Lady Caswell, whose lord husband was beheaded by King Aegon II at King's Landing when he refused to renounce the Queen, had closed her gates, turning away even anointed knights and lords when they came to her seeking refuge. South of the river, the campfires of the broken men could be seen through the trees by night, while the town's sept sheltered hundreds of wounded. Every inn was full, even the Hogshead, a dismal sty of a hostelry.